On January 4, 2026, the Taliban issued a new criminal procedure code for courts. Buried within its 119 articles is a clause that has shaken human and women rights groups across the world. Its Article 32 states that if a husband beats his wife and the assault does not result in broken bones or open wounds, it may not amount to a punishable offense. I will repeat this supposed law once again. If a husband beats his wife and the assault does not result in broken bones or open wounds, it may not amount to a punishable offense. This act is essentially legalizing domestic violence. Moreover, a husband can only be punished for a maximum of 15 days if a woman can prove her severe injury before a judge. However, she cannot go to a judge without a mahram or a male companion in the first place. Other forms of physical and sexual violence are also not explicitly prohibited in the new penal code. For many outside Afghanistan, this reads like another legal update from a regime that has been synonymous with laws trampling on women's freedom. But for Afghan women, it is deeply personal. It shapes what happens inside their homes, behind closed doors, where the law now appears to look away. Consider a young woman in Kabul who returns to her parents' house after abuse by her husband. As per Article 34 of the code, leaving her husband's home without permission can itself be treated as defiance. Seeking refuge may invite punishment of up to 3 months. And this new penal code does not stand alone. It connects to a series of decisions taken since August 2021, when Taliban swept back to power in Afghanistan, that have steadily narrowed women's rights both inside and outside their homes. The consequences begin with healthcare. In some provinces, women cannot be treated by male doctors. At the same time, women have been barred from studying medicine and midwifery, most recently in December 2024, and clinical training for female students has also been halted or curtailed. Get this, Afghanistan already struggles with high maternal mortality and adolescent pregnancies as per data by UN Women. Now imagine a woman in a rural district going into obstructed labor. The nearest trained female doctor may be hours away, and a male doctor may not even examine her without a male guardian's approval. Education tells a similar story. In March 2022, girls above grade 6 were told not to return to school. In December 2022, women were barred from universities. Afghanistan is now the only country in the world where girls are formally barred from secondary and higher education. Taliban have also banned private classes or homeschooling for girls, especially for subjects like maths and science. As per data by UN Women, 55.4% women in Afghanistan have received no education ever, including madrasa education. Moreover, the average years of schooling for women in Afghanistan is now just 3.3 years, less than half of men in the country. The impact spills into employment as well. At first, women were told to stay at home temporarily in an order issued by the Taliban on August 21, 2021. The justification? To ensure that women are not, quote, treated in a disrespectful way or, quote, God forbid, hurt, end quote, states Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid. Then came sector-specific bans. In December 2022, women were barred from working for non-governmental organizations or NGOs. In 2023, even Afghan women employed by the United Nations faced restrictions. Nearly 90% of Afghan women report severe limitations on their ability to work. Financial dependence further deepens vulnerability, especially when legal protections inside the home are also weakening. As per UN Women, less than 7% of women in Afghanistan now have access to any kind of banking service. Politically, women have disappeared from decision-making spaces. There are no women in the Taliban cabinet. The Ministry of Women's Affairs has been replaced by the Ministry for the Propagation of Virtue and Prevention of Vice. Women who protested the education bans in the year 2021 and 22 were detained, some vanishing for weeks before reappearing under pressure and fear. The new criminal procedure code includes vague provisions that allow punishment for acts or expressions deemed contrary to official interpretations. It introduces social categories that affect how punishment is determined, weakening the idea that everyone stands equal before the law, even legitimizing the owning and punishment of slaves by their owners. For women, this means fewer safeguards and less visibility in a system that has already sidelined them. Even everyday social life has been reshaped. In November 2022, women were banned from parks and gyms. Beauty salons were shut down in 2023. Face covering orders were reimposed in May 2022. Mobility restrictions reinforce that isolation. Women require a male guardian or a mehram as per Islamic traditions for long distance travel and face barriers in accessing institutions. Each rule may appear procedural on paper. Together, they construct a life lived within permissions and limitations. The Taliban describes these measures as moral governance rooted in religious interpretations and Afghan tradition. Yet, the international community has reacted rather meekly. While the United Nations has described the situation as institutionalized discrimination and many governments have withheld recognition of the Taliban ruled Afghanistan, the actions haven't moved beyond statements and lip service. At the same time, regional actors, including India, continue limited engagement, balancing concerns over human rights with geopolitical pragmatism. We have the Hindu's Kallol Bhattacherjee to understand this aspect a little better. Kallol sir, when the Taliban frames these laws as religiously and culturally authentic, how much of that is ideological conviction and how much is political messaging aimed at consolidating its support base?
Well, we have to look at Taliban in the context that it's almost more than 4 years now, right, or about to be in that time frame. So Taliban has not been able to do something internally in terms of mobilizing a lot of support, because the whole idea was that Taliban had to take over the governance and then create an inclusive governance. There were also talks about setting up the famous Shura, the Afghan Shura, and they have not been able to convene that Shura either. So overall, the promise of creating an inclusive Afghan society, which of course Taliban always doubted the Taliban would do it ultimately, but there were from the beginning, there were these pressures from, say, these groups like Hazaras and Tajiks and others. They all felt that at some point in the future, Taliban would create an inclusive structure. They would begin as Taliban and then slowly, gradually bring in other groups and other sectors of the Afghan society. That hasn't happened so far. So they are trying to consolidate their political agenda in the home front in the given time frame that they have been in power. They have tried to secure international support, but not everybody has recognized them openly, because they're also sort of a taboo in the international platforms, because like, for example, Russia as well as India, they all have established some sort of de facto relation, but nobody is willing to bestow a de jure, recognition on Taliban. So, given all these limitations, they are under a lot of domestic pressure. And then there are also these leadership rivalries that are happening within Taliban. And as a result, what the Taliban is trying to do is that it's trying to convey that it is taking an uncompromising position when it comes to its fundamental principles. And when it comes to orthodoxy, it's always easiest to impose orthodoxy on the weakest section on one's society. And the Afghan society, it goes without saying, the women have been the worst sufferers of the conflict spanning almost half a century and little more than that. So what the Taliban are doing is essentially sending that message across its own leadership spectrum, and conveying that the fundamental principles of Taliban movement have not been diluted because of the fact that they are in power. And that is the primary motive to me. It looks more like an internal dynamic which is propelling this particular phase of so-called reform or legal reform and etc. that they are carrying out.
Right, sir. Right, sir. We have heard criticism from the United Nations and many governments. But in practical terms, what leverage does international community really have today over Afghanistan and the Taliban?
Taliban obviously is harnessing whatever it has been able to achieve internationally in its domestic front. It did not expect that it would find the kind of engagement at the international level when it came in 2021. Today, we find that almost, if we can even say, some of the top 15 countries of the world are in contact with the Taliban. And as a result, it actually can boast. I mean, look at also the economic front of Taliban. I mean, Taliban's market, it is a kind of, in collaboration. I mean, because of the support from Iran that it receives, it has been able to do considerable amount of trade through the Iranian ports, like for Chabahar. And similarly, India has been, there has been, these commercial agreements with India. So they are managing to get whatever they want. So these international engagements also embolden Taliban to do whatever they want at the domestic level. And I think, one has to look at it from the broader context that the international stakeholders or even major powers, when they criticize the Taliban or criticize the recent diktats the Taliban have come up with, the fact is, it is because of the engagement that they have provided, and they have been very strong critique of even these engagements, because there were these fears from the very beginning that the more you engage with the Taliban, the more oppressive it would actually become for its own disadvantaged sections of the population. At the level of doing anything concrete, I don't think even the international stakeholders are in a position, because in a very sad way, they are also complicit in enabling Taliban do what they are doing right now.
Sir, is there any realistic pathway where diplomatic engagement could influence internal policies on women? Or are these restrictions central to how Taliban defines its rule?
The gender issues, that is the attitude towards women, is a place where Taliban never wanted to mellow down. From the beginning, there were expectations that Taliban would take it easy when it comes to arming its cadre, would take it easy as far as ethnic violence towards minority communities were concerned. Those factors they can accommodate. But then, as we have seen historically speaking, Taliban has a very strong position when it comes to imposing very harsh conditions on Afghan women, because they feel that it is somehow, somehow tied to their popularity among the tribes of Afghanistan, and that they have not compromised so far. So realistically speaking, what will really work is probably isolating the Taliban regime totally and teaching them a lesson that, in a way that they will really be punished. But that hasn't happened, no? Because since that has not happened in the first place, that itself has led to the whole unfortunate situation that we are seeing the Afghan women right now landing in. And the more this engagement proceeds with the Taliban, the more Taliban will become repressive on the home front. So I'm not sure if the international community is right now even looking at the hardships that the Taliban is imposing on women, because the world is looking at other theaters, and unfortunately the condition of the Afghan women is really not on that list of priorities.
In the late 1990s, similar restrictions defined the Taliban's first regime. After 2001, a generation of Afghan girls entered schools, universities, and newsrooms. That generation now watches that space around it shrink. Yet, even within its constrictions, stories of quiet resistance persist. Former students keep their notebooks, not because they are certain they will return to class, but because giving them up would mean surrendering any kind of hope. The new penal code attempts to formalize a particular vision of society, one where women's autonomy is tightly controlled. But beyond the legal language are real lives, negotiating daily uncertainty. The question now is not only how far these restrictions will go, but whether the world and Afghan society itself can find ways to keep those closed doors from becoming permanent. That's all for now. For more such videos, please subscribe to The Hindu. If you have any feedback or suggestions for us, please write to us at videos@thehindu.co.in. Thank you.